The story I'm about to share is not just about a house, but about pride, injustice, and the shocking way people can underestimate you. The HOA thought my house was nothing special, almost worthless. But the truth. My home is valued at over $12 million, and the journey to prove that has been one of the most emotional battles of my life. I still remember the first letter that came in the mail. The envelope looked official, with the HOA's logo printed neatly on the top corner. At first, I thought it was just another notice about community landscaping or maybe a small fee increase. But when I tore it open, my heart sank. Inside, in cold, printed words, it said, "Your property value is far below the community standard." I froze. I read the line again. Far below the community standard? I laughed for a second, thinking it was some sort of mistake. After all, my house wasn't just a home. It was the result of years of sacrifice, blood, sweat, and endless late nights working to build something meaningful. But the HOA didn't see that. To them, it was just another line on paper, another judgment passed without understanding the story behind it. And in that moment, I felt something burning deep inside me, not just anger, but determination. Have you ever been judged unfairly? Have you ever had someone look at you, your work, your life, and dismiss it as cheap? That's exactly how I felt. But this wasn't just about money. This was about respect. This was about fighting back when people try to shrink your worth down to a number. You see, my house wasn't ordinary. Every corner of it held a memory. The marble in the kitchen wasn't just imported. It was the very piece I saved up for after skipping vacations for 3 years. The wood beams in the ceiling? Handcrafted by artisans who poured their heart into every detail. And the land itself? It had been in my family for decades, holding stories of generations before me. Yet, none of that mattered to the HOA. They wanted to slap a cheap label on it, as if my home, my dream, was nothing more than a run-down property dragging down their statistics. I can still picture myself sitting at the dining table with that letter in my hand. The chandelier light flickered above me, and I remember whispering out loud, "Do they even know what they're talking about?" It wasn't just disbelief. It was insult. It was betrayal. And it made me realize something important. Sometimes, you have to prove your worth to people who can't see it. So, I decided to fight back. But this wasn't just going to be a quiet fight. I was going to show them, and I was going to show the world. Step 1 was hiring an independent appraiser. Not just any appraiser, but one with a reputation so strong the HOA wouldn't dare to argue. When the man arrived, he shook my hand firmly and said, "Don't worry. The truth always comes out." And I needed to hear that. Because in that moment, I wasn't just defending my house. I was defending my name. As he walked through my home, he paused often. He ran his hand across the stone walls. He looked up at the architecture with wide eyes. He took careful notes, snapping photos, measuring details that the HOA had clearly ignored. "Whoever told you this house was cheap doesn't know what they're looking at," he muttered. And those words felt like oxygen to me. Finally, someone saw it. Finally, someone understood. But here's the real twist. When the appraiser finished his report, the value of my home came back at $12 million. $12 million. I sat there holding the report, smiling through tears. This wasn't just about money. This was about validation. This was about proving that the late nights, the sacrifices, the struggles, they were all worth it. Strong hook. And here's where the story gets even more powerful. Because the HOA didn't believe me at first. They tried to ignore the report. They tried to dismiss it, saying things like, "Oh, maybe the appraiser was biased," or "maybe the market is inflated." But let me ask you this. How many times have people tried to dismiss your success just because it made them uncomfortable? I refused to back down. I showed them the paperwork. I showed them the numbers. And then, I showed them something more powerful than numbers, the story behind it all. I told them about the history of the land. About how my grandparents had worked this soil with their bare hands. How my parents had dreamed of building something lasting. And how I had taken that dream and turned it into a home that wasn't just valuable, but priceless. By the time I finished, even some of the HOA members were silent. They knew they had underestimated me. They knew they had underestimated my home. Emotional pause. Sometimes life is like that, isn't it? People only see the surface. They only see what they want to see. But they don't see the struggle. They don't see the sacrifice. They don't see the story behind your success. That's why this battle wasn't just about real estate. It was about something every single one of us goes through. It was about standing tall when people try to shrink you. It was about refusing to let others define your worth. And let me tell you something. The day I held that $12 million appraisal in my hand, I didn't just win against the HOA. I won against every single voice that had ever doubted me. I won against the whispers that said, "You're not enough." I won against the judgment that tried to put me in a box. Because here's the truth. You are worth more than the labels people put on you. Your value isn't determined by what others see at a glance. Your value is in your story, your fight, your heart, and your persistence. And so, as I stood there in my living room, looking out at the view from the windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from doubt. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the weight of other people's opinions. The appraisal was in my hand. It was official. My home was worth $12 million. But even with the truth staring them in the face, the HOA wasn't ready to admit defeat. At first, I thought they would apologize. I thought they would say, "We made a mistake. We're sorry." But that didn't happen. Instead, they doubled down. They sent another notice, questioning the legitimacy of my appraiser. They tried to corner me, hoping I would back off, hoping I would give in to their pressure. But let me tell you something important. When people underestimate you, they expect you to stay quiet. They expect you to swallow the insult and move on. They never expect you to stand up and fight. And that's when I decided, if they wanted a fight, I was ready for it. I hired lawyers. Not because I loved conflict, but because sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't about to let them treat me as if I didn't matter. The first meeting with the HOA board was like walking into a lion's den. They sat around a polished table, arms folded, eyes sharp, waiting for me to break. But I didn't break. I stood taller than ever. I placed the appraisal report on the table, slid it toward them, and said clearly, "This is the value of my home. This is the truth. And you will not take that away from me." The room went silent. One of them coughed nervously. Another shuffled papers, avoiding my gaze. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Because here's the thing about power. It only works if you give in to it. And I was done giving in. Hook. Have you ever faced a room full of people waiting for you to fail? That moment where every eye is on you, every whisper is against you, every breath feels heavy? That's exactly what this was. But here's the secret. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to bend. As the days went on, word spread in the community. Neighbors began to talk. Some whispered behind fences, others asked me quietly, "Is it true? Did they really say your house was cheap?" And when I told them the story, many of them shook their heads in disbelief. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of my neighbors started to side with me. Because deep down, they knew it wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. It was about every homeowner who had ever felt powerless against the HOA. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson, came up to me with tears in her eyes. She said, "They did the same thing to me years ago. They told me my garden was messy, when it was the only joy I had after losing my husband. I wish I had fought back like you." Her words hit me hard. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was bigger. This was about standing up for every person who had been silenced, belittled, or judged unfairly. So I pushed harder. I gathered support. I filed appeals. I made sure every piece of evidence was airtight. And the more I fought, the more people rallied behind me. The HOA wasn't just facing me anymore. They were facing a community that was tired of being underestimated. But here's the part that will shock you. The HOA finally agreed to bring in a second independent appraiser of their own choosing. They thought this would crush my argument, that their appraiser would come back with a low value to prove them right. I was nervous, of course. I won't lie to you. The night before the appraisal, I barely slept. What if the value came back lower? What if I lost everything I had worked for? The doubt was real. The fear was heavy. But I held on to one thing: the truth doesn't need defending, it just needs to be seen. The second appraiser walked through my home carefully. He didn't say much. His expression was unreadable, his notes endless. When he left, I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. Days later, the results came in. I held the envelope in my hands, my palms sweaty, my heart pounding. And when I opened it, I gasped. The value: $12.4 million. Even higher than the first. I laughed, I cried, I shouted in relief. Because not only was I right, I was more right than I could have imagined. The HOA had no more ground to stand on. They had been exposed. They had been proven wrong, twice, in undeniable ways. Hook. But here's the lesson I want you to take from this. Sometimes in life, people will try to cut you down, not because you are weak, but because you are strong. Not because you are worthless, but because you shine too bright. And when you shine, it makes others uncomfortable. But their discomfort is not your problem. Your only job is to keep shining. When the news spread, everything changed. Neighbors started congratulating me, saying, "You showed them." Even people who had doubted me before now looked at me with respect. And the HOA? Well, let's just say they went very quiet after that. But I didn't stop there. I used my voice to push for change. I demanded fairer practices. I demanded respect for homeowners. And slowly, things began to shift. Because one person's courage can ignite a fire that spreads far beyond their own story. And maybe that's why this journey happened to me. Maybe it wasn't just about proving the value of a house. Maybe it was about proving something bigger, that no matter how many people underestimate you, your worth is never up for debate. I want to tell you something personal here. There was a time in my life when I didn't believe in myself. When I thought maybe the critics were right, maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe my dreams were too big. But standing up to the HOA reminded me of something vital. Your worth doesn't come from their approval. It comes from your belief in yourself. So, let me leave you with this. If someone tells you that you're not valuable, if someone tells you that your dreams are cheap, if someone tries to shrink your light to make themselves comfortable, remember this story. Remember the house that was called worthless but stood tall at $12 million. Remember that the truth always rises, no matter how hard people try to bury it. Stand up for yourself. Fight for your worth. Don't let anyone, not even an entire board of people, tell you who you are or what you're worth. Because at the end of the day, your value is priceless, your story is powerful, and your fight is proof that you were never cheap. You were extraordinary all along.